Wonderful. I love vintage seed packs and the catalog. I think they are so beautiful, so artistic. Okay, wonderful.
They are absolutely gorgeous, and I make use of them a lot in this talk.
Yeah, wonderful. So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'm Shayla, Seedy Saturdays 2021 Program Coordinator, and I will be moderating today's events. This session is being recorded for you to view at a later time. Today's presentations were made possible by the support of our sponsors, Ward 8 Councillor John Paul Danko, Mohawk Sustainability, Hamilton Public Library, Mount Hamilton Horticulture Society, and Fresh Start Environment. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Erin Aults. Erin is the librarian and archivist at Royal Botanical Gardens and the Center of Canadian Historical Horticulture Studies at RBG. Over the past 4 years, Erin has focused her research efforts on developing an understanding of the history of gardening in Southern Ontario and the industries created around that. So she gets to nerd out on heritage seed catalogs and gardening books on a regular basis and loves sharing that knowledge. For those of you just joining in, welcome. I now present to you Erin Aults, who will begin her presentation with a land acknowledgement shortly.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for the intro, Shayla. We started off this talk with a poll, and I see that 80% of you have voted, so keep on voting if you haven't, as you're coming in. It's lovely to see that of the folks that did vote, 92% of you, or 22, are still looking forward to receiving seed catalogs in the mail. That's great to see. I think that it's so important that these ephemeral material object pieces are still around in our culture. I know I certainly look forward to them. My partner and I, we've received 4 or 5 catalogs so far this year, and I'm looking forward to a few more. They're just these little presents in the mailbox, and who doesn't need that right now? So this talk today is going to be celebrating the seed companies from Hamilton and the gorgeous seed catalogs that they produce. So as Shayla said, my name's Erin Aults, and we're going to be talking about the fascinating history of Hamilton seed companies. We're going to start in Hamilton in 1851 and follow them through until about the 1910s. We'll take a look at the catalogs they published, and I'll touch briefly on the other companies that made a big impact on Hamilton after that 1910 point. I'd like to end the talk with a chat about the seed companies that you remember in Hamilton and what seed companies you still look forward to for purchasing seeds. I do want to start my talk today with an Indigenous land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement has extra dimensions when I talk about the history of gardening and horticulture in Southern Ontario. Settlers are not the first gardeners on Turtle Island. These lands have been walked and worked by people for their own needs for millennia. There's evidence of the depth of that history in the archaeological discovery of a notched projectile point, or what many of us simply might call an arrowhead, along the shore of Coutts Paradise that dates back about 9,000 years ago. To briefly put that in perspective, the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt is approximately only half that age, being built about 4,500 years ago. Princess Point, which is located on the south shore of Coutts Paradise, was one of the many places used by the group of people that are now called the Princess Point culture by archaeologists. These skilled people made distinctive pottery that help us link the various sites they occupied in our area. Pieces of pottery and other traces of their settlement can be found in our area from over 1,500 years ago. At these same sites, archaeologists have also discovered maize kernels that date back as far as 500 Common Era, some of the earliest direct evidence of archaeology in the northeast of North America. The Indigenous people living there might also have stewarded and used the wild rice that once grew in abundance in Coutts Paradise, as well as the wide range of birds, fish, mammals, and other plants that RBG endeavors to protect. I would like to acknowledge the long history of First Nations and Métis people in Ontario and pay respects to the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the holders of the Between the Lakes Treaty No. 3 from 1792, with the Crown for the lands now stewarded by RBG, and to also pay respects to the 6 nations of the Grand River Territory. We are within the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat nations. At RBG, we're aware of the long history of Indigenous peoples on the land, and we hope to continue to work together in positive, reciprocal, and respectful ways for the good of everyone. So I said I was going to talk about Hamilton, but first I'm going to start a little bit earlier in that. There was an Englishman who came to North America hoping to open a seed business. His name was David Landreth. In 1780, David Landreth was 28 at the time, immigrated from Northumberland County, the uppermost county of England. Excuse me. And Northumberland County butts up against Scotland. He came seeking his fortune, or at least a livelihood, selling seeds. He settled in Montreal. As you can see from this plan of Montreal from 1760, and the fact that Montreal seems more garden than anything else, it seems as though there would have been ample opportunity for seed sellers. While later Canadian plantsmen will claim that the cold climate helps create strong plants, Mr. Landreth said it was too damn cold. He couldn't sell any seeds, and he was awfully cold while he was trying to do it. So after 3 years spent in this harsh climate, he took his plans for a seed company and headed south to sunny and, more important, warmer Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and established a seed business in 1784. I'm telling you this because what he ended up printing in Philadelphia ended up being North America's first seed catalog. He also was the first seed company to introduce zinnias and tomato seeds to the US market. And I find it such a tragedy that Montreal's cold weather stopped us from being able to add those pivotal moments to the history of horticulture in Canada. And if there was any doubt about the location of the Landreths and Sons, I feel like this seed catalog from 1896 with the bald eagle and the American flag really sells that he was definitely an American. D. Landreth and Sons is still in existence today, although it's changed hands multiple times. So with this story in mind, I'm jumping ahead 65 years to 1851, when Canada's first seed catalog was published right here in Hamilton. It was produced by John A. Seeds Company on James Street in Hamilton, and this pivotal role that Hamilton played in the seed industry continues into the next century. The folks listed on this slide, John A. Bruce, David Murray, Robert Evans, Steele and Briggs, Spectator Lithography, and Duncan Lithography, are all folks that played an important part in Hamilton's early seed history. So early seed and nursery trade catalogs would be short lists of food plants. Now, William Kustad's nursery list, which was published in 1827, is the first catalog known of in Upper Canada. He was the owner of Toronto Nurseries, which was located in York. And this 18-page catalog primarily listed apple trees. He had several hundred apple trees for sale, and he, along with the famous Johnny Appleseed, were invested in apple trees not for snacking apples, but for the delicious, fermented, alcoholic, and very, very popular hard cider. Now, this catalog that I'm showing on this slide is actually a William W. Kustad in Cleveland, Ohio from 1845. Now, I'm not certain that this was the same person, although there is certainly a strong likelihood, but it's still a good illustration of what the price lists looked like that were the mainstays in the early 1800s. You can see how simple the pages were, just text, no real illustrations, no descriptions other than a few remarks. And this changed drastically in the coming years. Now, I'm aware that I'm cutting hairs here, but it is important to note that in this story, this is not the first seed catalog, the 1827, but it is the earliest known nursery trade list in Upper Canada. We still get to hold the seed catalog here in Hamilton as the first one in Canada. So Hamilton's seedy side starts in 1851, when John A. Bruce moves to Hamilton. He created a company that lasted from 1851 to 1948. John A. Bruce came from Scotland, settled in Toronto. He came from Scotland in 1850, settled in Toronto, and then quickly moved to Hamilton a year later. He bought a seed store that had opened up the year before on James Street. He then started producing, as I've said, Canada's first seed catalog. He started out in a small building on James Street, but moved in 1858 to King Street West. In 1875, the business moved into a much larger building, still on King Street, that you will see later in the presentation, both on seed catalogs and on a map, that's located at King Street West and McNabb Street. He sold predominantly to farmers, market gardeners, and households in a section of the catalog called Kitchen Gardens. He sold vegetables such as tomatoes, cabbage, and potatoes for the home market, and Timothy, mango wurtzels, and Swede turnips for the farmers as feedstock. He turned Hamilton into a horticultural haven that I think has lasting impacts today. When he retired in 1893, his brother Frank took over the business, and later Frank's sons took it over. By the time he passed away in 1920, he was considered a highly esteemed citizen of Hamilton. His interests had gone beyond his business endeavors. He'd held leadership positions in Hamilton Horticultural Society, along with one William Hendry, who has a lasting impact on my place of employ, Royal Botanical Gardens. He also held a leadership position in the Great Central Fair. He was a pew holder in his church, St. Paul's, and was one of the oldest members of the Lodge of Strict Observance. He never married, and some of his fairly large estate went to his relatives, but the rest went to charities, including $100,000 to the Hamilton Health Association. And one of the more touching donations from his estate was to an orphanage called Home of the Friendless and Infants Home. Why I find this so touching is that this was the charity founded by the widow of Bruce's main seed competitor, Robert Evans. So here's an image of Robert Evans on the left. On the right is his 1887 seed catalog, which I enjoy because I think that Bruce and that bulldog share a little bit of a striking resemblance. This was his 36th annual catalog, and he later starts to move into bigger and more colorful catalogs as he goes. His early seed catalogs, this is his 1871, which is the oldest one that RBG has, the earliest one. They focus on vegetables and herbs. The short catalog is about 2/3 vegetables and herbs, with the rest being flowers. Now this 1871 catalog, I think, is about 60 pages, which is quite a far cry from the 18-page pamphlet size one that William Kustad created in 27. There was certainly a middle ground where his earlier catalogs were probably in the 30s to 40 pages, as he was using mainly price listings, which is a lot smaller of a space that you get to take up. So this catalog is 2/3 vegetables and herbs, with the rest being flowers, insecticides, and fertilizers. Starting in the 1870s, his catalogs show that plants were being cultivated in southern Ontario for our specific climate. There are varieties that were developed in Niagara, Hamilton, Burlington, and eventually in Guelph at the Ontario Agricultural College. These included melons, tomatoes, and flowers, all designed for Ontario's weather and soil. One of the most popular was the Unsworth Melon, which was grown by market gardeners across southern Ontario. This melon was first grown at Unsworth Greenhouses, which Unsworth Avenue in Burlington is named for. From the 1870s through the early 20th century, the seed catalogs grew from the few black and white pages that you've seen so far, listing plants and prices, to 120 plus pages, with many featuring gorgeous color illustrations. These early seed companies relied on the sales of fruits and vegetables, and the bulk of their offerings continue to be food plants. Here are a few examples of pages from their early seed catalogs. They were growing a large variety of plants and creating their own cultivars that were best suited to the environment. So this is the front and back of the 1891 seed catalog for John A. Bruce. And you can see here that he's starting to develop a little bit with colors. He has a lot more images. And I love this centerpiece that is him probably just in the middle of the catalog. The catalog would mainly be black and white in the middle, with the color reserved for the front and the back and a few pages on the inside. But this middle piece, he's so proudly exclaiming his vegetables that he has for sale for his garden seeds. And this was at the very beginning of the catalog. Now this is a page from Hamilton's seed directory on the right-hand side from 1865 and 1866. And it has John A. Bruce, seed growers and importers on the top there. And right next to it, right underneath, is the undertaker. And this was true of his seed warehouse too. It was located right next door to the undertaker and across from the bank. I find it a very vivid comparison to the innocence and youth on the cover of Bruce's 1890 catalog. It also makes me wonder about that fertile soil that their seeds were growing in. Bruce was soon to be competing with some homegrown competition. Robert Evans was next in Hamilton. Born in Dublin, Ireland in 1843, the Evans family moved to Canada when Robert was 4. Tracing the path of Bruce, they spent a short time in Toronto and then settled in Hamilton by 1848. His father was a gardener, and Robert Evans quickly took up the family line of work. He started working for Bruce in 1858 at the age of 15. He worked there for several years before deciding that he wanted to open his own seed company. He saw the opportunity that Hamilton presented to seedsmen, so he opened up his shop in 1871, just 2 blocks away from Bruce's seeds warehouses. Evans radically improved upon the quality of catalogs from Bruce's production. Our earliest seed catalog from Evans in RBG's collection is 1884, and you can see here that it shows a significant step up in visual aesthetics from the Bruce catalogs of the same era. This is an internal image on the right-hand side of 1890, and you can see that the illustrations have really changed dramatically, and they continue to use children and innocents and women, of course, as a means of advertising the quality of their material as well as the moral upstandingness of it. He produced stunningly beautiful catalogs, promoted mail order and quick shipping, and developed some of his own varieties of market vegetables. Evans perhaps had a better understanding of the importance of visual appeal because his catalogs were filled with colorful lithographies of the fruit and vegetables he sold. Previous to this early Evans catalog, I can't say I've ever seen a potato take a centerfold image. This is the most lascivious potato I think I've ever seen in my life. Evans was also considered an upstanding citizen. He participated in local government, held positions in the Great Central Fair Committee, and otherwise participated in civic life. His wife, as I mentioned previously, opened an orphanage. Evans passed away in December of 1899. His wife ran the business along with Evans' business partner, Andrew Angus, until they sold to the Toronto firm Steele Briggs in 1904. In the summer of 2018, when I was spending weeks researching these companies, I spent a lot of time at Hamilton Public Library, Local History and Archives, and in my own archival collection, looking at seed catalogs, city directories, obituaries, newspaper articles, etc. I felt I had a fairly good grasp on the landscape, but this map, this 1911 fire insurance map, changed my thinking and helped me understand the central role that these companies had in Hamilton. This map shows the importance of these companies and how prominently they were placed. Robert Evans, or Steele Briggs, is on the map. Conan's Nursery is on this map. Triguno Seeds is also very close on this map. And Rosedale Nursery, which we'll discuss later, that provided seeds for Bruce, had been to the west, but is now located to the east on this map. And of course, John A. Bruce is on this map as well. So here's an illustration of where those different seed companies were. You can see that Steele Briggs is at the top right. The inset is at the top right. They were located there on York, McNabb, and Market Street. And this is essentially where the Central Library and Farmers Market is now. So since this is 1911, Steele Briggs owned the shop at that time. You can see how centrally located it was to City Hall and Market Square. John A. Bruce is located just 2 blocks away to the south at McNabb and King. And again, you can see the inset and the store building, the store, what it looks like above that. Right beside them to the left is the Undertaker, as I've mentioned. And across the street, across McNabb, is a bank, as well as a Turkish bath above there. The red numbers show Trigunos up at the top left. And this is where Triguno Seeds opened in 1913. They moved to multiple sites, but this was their opening right beside where Steel Briggs would have been. And then number 2, which is right across the street from Bruce Seeds, is where Conan Seed Company opened. Now, they opened in 1906. They were originally a florist, and they did move out to Waterdown later. But it is fascinating to see how central everything was, that they had really created this 2-block central spot for seeds and horticultural implements. So this is the cover of Robert Evans and Company 1894 seed catalog. This is one of my favorite seed catalogs because of what it reveals to us, the insight that it gives us into Hamilton and the prominence of the seed companies. These are very well-dressed market gardeners and folks that are at the market, and they're selling the fruits of their labors. Evans often, his catalogs often featured what to me looks like a leprechaun. That could be because I know that Evans is Irish, but the man on the right there, on the left, in the green, images like him will be seen on many of Evans' catalog covers. I love the quote at the bottom in the red that reads, "Yes, ma'am, all grown from Evans seeds." So Hamilton's early Market Square and City Hall is the building that's to the right. You can see the stalls of the market gardeners that are selling. And of course, that's Evans Seed Company in the background. And that would be the office and warehouse that was located at the corners of McNabb, York, and Market Street. So here's a description from the Spectator newspaper article about Evans Seed Company explaining the layout and the workings of the store. This description is from 1878. The ground floor is occupied as a sales room and office. The second story embraces the vegetable seed department, which is very complete, where a very large number of young women are employed in papering, boxing, and otherwise preparing stock for the market. The third story is divided into 5 sections. Number 1 room contains carrot and mango wurzel, and judging from the immense supply on hand, there can be little doubt that all customers will have an abundance. Room number 2 contains orchard grass, bluegrass, red top grass, perennial ryegrass, and other finer varieties. Room number 3 is devoted to garden peas such as Champion of England, Philadelphia, Extra Early, Carter's First Crop, and on and on. Mr. Evans has personally supervised the production of the several varieties in this department and can vouch for the purity of the stock. Room number 4 contains Swedish turnip seed, and the amount of business done in this branch alone would astonish anyone who's not given the growth of Swedish turnip in Canada proper consideration. Room number 5 contains Timothy and Clover seeds, and the proprietor makes a special point in purchasing to secure nothing but the best qualities. The 4th story of the building is used as a storage room for onion sets, top onions, and company, and the stock is large and in fine condition. Evans' covers were filled with symbolism. Both Evans and Bruce were intent on showing their dedication to the British Empire. Evans served in the military during the Fenian raids, and he also knew that much of gardening style was coming from European influence. This is reflected not only in his catalog covers, but also in his flower and plant choices. Evans passed away in 1899, but his widow continued to run the business until she sold in 1904. So why did Hamilton take such a central role in seed commerce in Canada at the turn of the century? Here again, location was the prime advantage. Hamilton acted as a major port from Europe into the west of Canada. It was situated just past the fertile soils and climate of the Niagara fruit basket area, which continues to be a major location for food growing in Canada. Finally, and probably most important, Hamilton had trains. In a book championing Hamilton as the electric city in 1910, it lists the Grand Trunk Railway system. The Southern, Northern, and Northwestern railways converge at this point, the CP Rail, the Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo Railway, the Michigan Central Railway, and New York Central Railway connect in Hamilton. And this doesn't include the electric railways that linked Hamilton to Grimsby, Stony Creek, and Dundas. This train system boosted the postal facilities as well. As a result, seed companies in Hamilton could receive orders quicker and ship orders further and faster than many other locations. Both Bruce and Evan sold across Canada, the US, and to Europe as well. This cover of Evan's seed catalog from 1895 is so descriptive in the importance of trains. If you look at the background of this image front and back, and I have it reversed so the front is on the right, you'll see that Evan centered the trains and their destination as a selling point. You can see the trains in the background on both sides, and underneath the trains, it will say their destination, such as to Buffalo, to St. Catharines, to Toronto, etc., etc. You can see these lines reaching out across the country and across North America as a whole. You'll also see that the same man shows up again there, the little leprechaun fellow, who I imagine is who Evans believed himself to be. So where did they get these seeds? Many seed merchants were immigrants. They still had close ties to their European countries. They would go on trips to Europe to see the latest plant cultivars grown and bring back seeds. Many would then have their own growing area or nursery grounds. The most documentation I've discovered for local growers sits with John A. Bruce's nurseryman, David Murray, who ran Rosedale Nurseries. Rosedale Nurseries is located in what is now downtown Hamilton. Here, Bruce and Murray would grow, experiment, select, and hybridize plants specifically for the Southern Ontario climate. Bruce took trips to Europe to see the latest fashions and trends in both ornamental flowers and food plants. Bruce describes his company's seed growing practices in his 1876 catalog. He writes, "We are bona fide seed growers, and on our own seed grounds, situated on Main Street East, we grow large breadths of such seeds as we find, from a lengthened practical experience, come to better maturity in this climate, and consequently produce better and more satisfactory crops than can be obtained from seeds of foreign growth. The important branch of our business is under the immediate personal supervision of our senior partner. We are thus enabled to ensure to our customers new and genuine seeds of undoubtable quality, and at such moderate prices that cannot be afforded by any house not similarly situated. We have extensive trial grounds where we have opportunity of thoroughly testing all new and old varieties of agricultural, vegetable, and flower seeds and discarding those that we consider least worthy of cultivation. Our trial grounds are a very interesting feature in our business, and any of our customers wishing to make selections would be amply repaid by a visit to our grounds in the summer and autumn months." So this is a bird's eye view of Hamilton, focusing on Ferguson Avenue. And Ferguson is here to the right-hand side of the map. You can see the train lines that go through, the rail lines that go through it. And this was where those rail lines are, and the long buildings along Ferguson was where the nursery grounds were. This site covered about 40 acres. Now this bird's eye image is, the illustration was done after the nursery was largely moved to make way for the railway buildings. This directory shows that Murray's nursery grounds covered quite a bit of areas. You can see that there were road cuts in between, and that Rosedale was just kind of sprinkled around within the other property ownerships. This is their new location over on Main Street East, and this was at least, they had moved there at least by 1883. This is from that 1883 catalog, and you can see the illustration, the seed barns that are there, the vast amount of fields that they're cultivating, and there's a very small orchard off to the left-hand side of the seed barns. And just to give you a sense, this is Ferguson Avenue Nursery grounds today. So it really is located downtown in the middle of Hamilton. While I don't know much about Evan's seed growing grounds, his nurseryman was F.G. Foster, who was in charge of the 5 conservatories that Evans had built at the corner of Charles and Hunter Street, which is very closely situated to where Whitehorn Museum is. In these, his company grew bedding plants and flowers for cut flower arrangements. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the lithography and the actual art. So the early kind of drab price lists soon became these 120 pages filled with these wonderful, wonderful etchings. The front and back, and often the few inner pages, were done in color. It was still fairly new at this time, this practice of lithography. But Duncan Lithography Company, which was just a few blocks over on McNabb Street, was where many images were produced for both Evans and and Bruce. They also used spectator printing in some of their earlier catalogs to produce this lithography. I love this page in the middle. The Westbury Swede turnip, the purple and yellow, is one of the most gorgeous turnips I think I've ever seen. The color, it's amazing that this color remains still so vibrant the 140 years later from when this was produced. So spectator printing did print many of the earlier ones. They were located a block away from Bruce's seed house. Later, both companies moved to Duncan Lithography Company, and it was really all about the local economy. Now, these lithography plates were created by artists who sold them to multiple seed companies. So you'll start to see some of the same images being used over and over again, both in one company's catalogs throughout the years and in different company catalogs, as they were both sold the same plate. We even have a few examples of the plate example books in our archives that were used by traveling salesmen. So Robert Evans learned the trade from John A. Bruce, and Evans later taught John Connon. In 1906, Connon opened his original store directly across from Bruce's on McNabb Street. A few years later, Triguno Seeds Limited set up shop at 25 York Boulevard, a few doors down from Steele and Briggs. John Connon moved to Waterdown in 1930, while John A. Bruce and Steele Briggs both closed by 1948. In 1948, Bruce's seed company suffered a massive fire, one of several that they'd suffered throughout their years, but this was the one that ended up putting them out of business. Triguno was pushed out of their Park Street shop by the construction of Copps Coliseum in the early 80s. They moved to Catherine Street North from Park Street, but unfortunately they closed in 2013. I think that their move from the core to the outskirts of town and being pushed further and further out was reflective of the role that seeds played in people's lives. Some seed companies sprouted in these outskirts, including William Dam Seeds, which took root in Ancaster in 1956 and is still mailing out their seed catalogs every year. They also have trial grounds and continue to develop hybrid plants as well. If you want to see some of the seed catalog art and how it's being used today, you should check out the tunnel on your way to Hendry Park from Royal Botanical Gardens Main Center. This tunnel is filled with fabricated collages of many images from Hamilton seed companies, predominantly from John A. Bruce, Robert Evans, and Webster Brothers, who were rose growers. This collage is one of my favorite examples of these materials being used in a non-traditional setting. It was produced by Cobalt Connects, Lisa Pujan Numaro, and David Couric. The artist focused on the cultural production point of view, that tie between artistic endeavor and the economy, but I'm often just so entranced with the images. I love the way that it's become part of the fabric of the botanical gardens, as this bird's nest crowning Queen Victoria so delightfully illustrates. Now I'm going to speak briefly about the archival collection that I'm responsible for at RBG. All the catalogs that we've seen today, except for that 1845 William Kustad catalog, are from the Centre for Canadian Historical Horticultural Centre's Catalogue Collection. This is Canada's largest collection of seed catalogs. It started in the early 1870s when Ina Brookman, RBG's librarian at the time, heard that the Ministry of Agriculture's Central Experimental Farm in Ottawa was getting rid of their seed catalog collection. She was a consummate collector and saw tremendous value in these items. We're so grateful for her forward thinking. She continued to receive donations throughout her time there until 1995. So there are only a handful or so of seed catalog collections in archives across North America. So to put the 30,000 seed catalogs that RBG has into perspective, Smithsonian has 10,000 catalogs, but Cornell has 200,000. Our collection spans 3 centuries and include catalogs from 46 countries. Well, the international material is made up primarily of US, United Kingdom, and Netherlands catalogs. We do have several other countries represented, including East and West Germany. The focus of the collection is certainly on Canada, with approximately half of the collection being from Canada. Because of this, because of where we are, where the collections were donated from, and the general population, Ontario has the most catalogs. We continue to collect catalogs, both historical and contemporary, as we try to delve deeper and deeper into the history of Canadian horticulture and preserve these catalogs for many years to come. The archive also has the personal papers of many professional horticulturists and garden enthusiasts, like Isabella Preston, Robert Keith, and Mary Eliza Blacklock, to name a few. These individuals and many others have contributed significantly to the horticultural field through their writings, businesses, public works, and scientific endeavor. So that's almost the end of my talk today, but it's February, and I felt very drawn to this opening paragraph. This is one of my favorite introductions from a seed catalog. This is from T.C. Robinson, who was a seedsman in Owen Sound. And this is his opening line in his 1883 catalog, and I find it speaks so clearly to the timeless quality of hope and optimism we all feel from a garden in spring, as well as the business of gardening. Mr. Robinson writes, "Beneath a deep covering of beautiful snow, my garden lies silent as if under the touch of death. But those who court the smiles of Dame Nature know that below the seeming shroud of securely repose, the germs of life in bud and root and sap cell that must spring into green leaf and brilliant flower and ruby fruit when the returning rays of the spring monarch shall render their snow blanket no longer needful. But if we want a rich harvest of fruit in summer, we must expend a sowing of brains in winter. A copious chapter of strawberries and raspberries in July and August can only follow an accurate and liberal index of plans and thoughts in February and March. But I gave you plenty of preliminary talk last fall, so we can afford now to get to business." So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions or comments, or I can show you some more catalogs that I have up. And I'd love to hear what catalogs and seed company websites you're spending your chilly February evenings looking through.
Wow. Thank you so much, Erin. Who knew that you can time travel in 2021 by just looking at the rich history of Hamilton seed catalogs? I know that I'm definitely inspired by all of the artwork on the seed catalogs. In our earlier promotion for Seedy Saturday, I actually took some of that inspiration and used it for the graphics in an unconventional way. So amazing to see that. And just know that I live so close to so much history. Yeah, so we'll definitely open the floor to questions now. Victoria asks, does the RBG collect modern catalogs to preserve, or do they have a certain age before you add them to your collection?
No, I'm actually collecting modern catalogs right now. So because seed catalogs and the material, the actual object rather than just website catalogs is kind of diminishing, I certainly see less catalogs that we're able to collect each year, but I still feel that the material object is so important in describing, and whoever it is in 30 years, 50 years that's going to be looking after this collection is going to appreciate the work that we're doing now in preserving contemporary ones.
Yeah, thank you. So Margaret, William Dam, Stokes, catalogs.
Those are great ones.
And Garrett would love to see more images if possible, and I think I'm definitely happy to see that as well.
Absolutely.
William Dam every year. Yeah, William Dams is a certain favorite. Be patient. Be patient. They are definitely overworked and under delayed a bit this year. So
I did a presentation to Burlington Horticultural Society recently, and Connie Dam was in the audience, and she was saying I think she said that they are trying to package twice as many seeds as they did last year. It is fascinating. Like, there's evidence of victory gardens in, seed catalogs from the 1914s, 1919s, and then again in the 1940s. And I love that this is coming around again, that we're doing victory gardens again.
Yeah, me too. Fiona says, we use dam seeds and matchbox seeds. I'd love to see some of their earlier seed catalogs. Yeah.
I collect matchbox seeds. I believe that Hannah is not producing a print one this year, but will hopefully again next year.
And we were fortunate enough to have Hannah with us this year for Seedy Saturday.
She's great. Her seed catalogs will use a lot of the old images, the old lithography and line drawings as the illustrations within her seed catalog. I love that she does that. William Dam uses predominantly photographs, and that's an interesting change, of course, that it happened.
Are there examples directed to children?
That's a fine question. There are not any, I cannot think of any that are directed towards children. Children are used a lot in advertisement of them. And there are some, there's a company from the US that I can't come up with the name right now, Peter somebody, maybe Peter Henderson. He uses a lot of his children being very humorous with the seeds, and this is from like 1890s through maybe 1940s. His children being entertaining in the garden or out in the field to market it. His catalogs have a lot of humor in them. So I'm sharing this is Bruce's seed this is their centennial, or their half a century, from 1900. And so you can see at this point that most of the images that I showed you, the vegetables were the primary spot. Around 1900, maybe a couple years before, flowers start taking some of the central role. They also move up in the catalog to being at the front of the catalog rather than the back, and taking up a lot more space. The vegetables move to the back and start taking up fewer and fewer spaces, and a lot of the illustrations is done around the flowers as well. So I'm trying to find you some other nice images. This is the back of Bruce's 1871. And so this is the lawn mowers that they were selling at the time.
Another question we have coming in is, I am curious if you notice the vegetables, etc., in the old catalogs are still in use, or if they're completely different.
It really depends on the company that you're looking at now. There are certainly a lot that are using heirloom seeds and continue to sell heirloom seeds, although a lot of those seeds are heirlooms not from the era that we discussed today, but more like 1920s, 1940s. And then some other seed companies are using pretty much all kind of the newer ones, like Burpee would do a lot of more contemporary ones that they're trialing and things like this. When we've done things at RBG, like the pumpkin trail, and they've tried to use the seed catalogs for the other gourds that they have on display, it's often difficult to find the seed catalog entry for them with any kind of illustration. In some ways that's good. There's some illustrations that are pretty problematic. But also it's too bad that those seeds aren't the gourds that are being sold today. So they're very popular ones like that. I think it was there's a cheese pumpkin that was best for pumpkin pie. And that's one that I often try to find an image of. It has a fun name too.
Thank you. So we have a question from Lennox. Lennox, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself.
Can you see me?
Yes, and I can hear you.
Perfect. So yeah, threefold. You mentioned Connie at William Dam. So I was at a meeting this morning where I think somebody else referenced it. They are hoping to open at earliest in April. Mm-hmm. And that may be later. And they also are 6 weeks. If you're ordering today, at least 6 weeks before you might get seed. So that's just an FYI. You actually also asked about other mail order, Richter's. I didn't see anybody mention that one, but that's just because Richter's has this exotic herbs that I kind of find very interesting. Richter's. My third and final question, or sorry, were you saying something, Erin?
I said Richter's is fantastic. I got to visit them in person in the fall of last year, and it was just heaven walking in there. Their herbs are so diverse. They have ones I'd never heard of. Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely nursery.
And exactly. People. That's yeah. And their catalog is, kind of like that too. Interesting.
Yeah. And
my third question
for a while, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Mm-hmm. My third question actually has to do with what I know now as Seedworks, which now I've learned, kind of the history. And I guess what was it called before? Was it Seedworks or Trigano's? Was that the one that moved?
I think Seedworks was where Trigano's moved to and closed in 2013.
Right. So my question really has to do with, do you think if Trigano's was able to sustain itself until, say, last year or when the pandemic occurred, do you think they would be doing big business right now and they would have, it would be completely different?
I am not the best person to ask that, but I would imagine that maybe not last year, seed companies have to prepare a year ahead, right? In order to have the stock. But I feel like they would have sold out of everything just like so many other seed companies did, and really find themselves being seen again as an important part of the culture of society, right? I think that many of the seed companies that are out there were so pleasantly surprised and overwhelmed with the call for seeds that happened last year because of the pandemic. And I think that I'm hoping that many of them are profiting and doing well as a result of that.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. And Trigano's, they were bought by Ontario Seed Company that I think is in Guelph or Waterloo. I'm sorry, I forget which. And at least up until recently, they still had a line of seeds that were the Trigano seeds. Thanks, Lennox.
Yeah, thank you.
So Christine here shares that she is trying to start a school share and a catalog. Like these would entice and help them pick. So I guess the question here would be, how would a school, or how would you get these catalogs for?
So I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. They want to create a catalog?
Yeah, so I guess
Actually, can I jump in?
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. I'm actually the school chair at one of the local elementary schools, and what I'm trying to launch is a seed sharing program. With the COVID restrictions, we want to be very, very safe and very, very careful, but we're looking at ways to integrate this into their program in their classroom. And I thought maybe if there was examples historically, if this was ever used in a catalog style in an educational setting as part of the learning process. And I know food literacy and food scarcity is something that is really important around here to a lot of families. And so I guess my question is, I'm trying to brainstorm, and I think this is something that would be really helpful to teachers, and maybe, so I know if it hasn't happened historically, that's perfectly a totally fine answer. But as you've got my wheels turning, thank you.
So so I can direct you to some sites that will have some of the historical seed catalogs. They're similar to what I have shown. They wouldn't necessarily, again, be designed for children, but places like, I think the National Agricultural Museum in the US has a seed catalog, like slideshow display exhibit kind of thing, as does a Washington University as well. But your best bet, if you want to find examples of older seed catalogs to model what it is you're doing after, and to just take a good look through, because a lot of the catalogs will discuss cultivation tips. They'll discuss different seeds that, like the mango wurzel is a type of vegetable I hadn't heard of before I started doing this. And it's a very large turnip beet type thing that was used as a feedstock, but like it would get quite heavy, like 40 pounds of a bulb that this would grow. You should check out the Biodiversity Heritage Library. I believe it might be BHL, or that's just what we call it in the library world. But it is a fantastic website to find things that are copyright free and agricultural in nature. So I don't know, does that help you at all, Christine?
It absolutely does. Thank you. Just the BHL one, can I get the long form again?
Yeah,
I've been taking notes.
It's Biodiversity Heritage Library. And it's just a large archival images website online. The other one, of course, would be archive.org. I think they pull images from the Biodiversity Heritage Library as well. So both sites would work. I would go to Biodiversity Heritage Library first, just because I think it's a little bit easier and smaller to search.
Thank you very, very much.
Sure, you're welcome. And Christine, you can always reach out to me if you want to take once I'm allowed to have researchers in, if you wanted to take a look at any of this, and this is true for anyone, you can reach out to me. It's E Aults. My last name is AULTS at rbg.ca. And I can give you some more examples of kind of different ones, and maybe pull some ideas of cultivation tips and things like that you might want to include.
I appreciate it so much, and I cannot promise you that you're not going to have a bunch of handmade catalogs coming to you for a coloring contest. I don't know what the future holds.
I would love this. I picked up a role-playing game that is garden-based when I was in Toronto at a bookstore recently, and was so excited to add this to the Seed Library, or to the Centre for Canadian Historical Horticultural Studies collection. So I want the weird stuff. Send it to me. This is, you know, horticulture is so, it's like libraries, right? It should be about equity and social justice and reaching everybody. And it is not about only the plant breeders and the people that were doing the scientific work, or the businesses. They were doing stuff. Everybody gets to partake in horticulture. So I want to see where it's being used every day in everybody's life.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that, Christine. And I'm definitely looking forward to those drawing contests. That would be such a fun way. And I had a question, but it slipped my mind, so I'll come back to that. But another question coming in from Jody is, would the catalogs be mailed out similar to today, or would they be picked up from the seed office?
So a lot of them are mailed out, and they're mailed out, the ones that I've shown you are mailed out free. And it's endearing. A lot of the catalogs will say, hey, if you're not going to use this, can you just pass it on to your neighbor who might use it? We'd really appreciate that, to try to keep on widening the base of their audience. There are a couple catalogs that we have that have a hole that was kind of drilled through the top left corner. And I think for those, they might have been at like a central spot in a town, a hardware store or a feed store, where you could go in, you could browse the catalog so that everybody could browse it. Not everybody in the town needed it. you would fill out the order form, and each catalog came with a order form and an envelope. And then once the company received it, the feed company or whatever the hardware store was, or that they would provide it to you from there. So I like this idea of the old Sears catalogs where you might go into the Sears store or into the post office to browse through it so you can order what you need.
Yeah. And then Christine, coming back to your seed for your class, I actually, there was a class at our community garden who came for a tour, and so they just had the children coming around the garden and drawing what they saw, and that was pretty inspirational. So that might be another thing, if it's allowed, reaching out to the Hamilton Community Garden Network and seeing if you can tour one of those gardens for inspiration.
When we had a exhibit up at RBG, one of the things we had was for kids to draw their own seed packet, to color in their own seed packet or create their own seed packet. That was another fun activity for kids.
Yeah, awesome. And do we have any other questions? If not, that will conclude the session for today. Wonderful. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you, guys.
For taking us into the wonderful history of Hamilton seed history.
Thanks for the great questions and the seed companies you told me about.
Yeah, definitely. To all of you who joined us today, we appreciate you taking the time to join in on Seedy Saturday's virtual event. Thank you for being here. And we hope to see you next year, hopefully in person.